Hello and welcome to Coffee and Conversation. I'm your host Karim Rafa and I'm joined today by George Tumar, the ambassador of Mongolia to Singapore. George, welcome on air.
Thank you, Karim. Very nice to get connected.
So before we really get into what's going on in Mongolia right now, can you give us a bit of a snapshot of the Mongolian economy and notably its commodity sector?
Mongolia's economy is historically quite reliant on commodity sectors, namely bulk commodities like copper concentrates and metallurgical coal that most of them are shipped to China. In the beginning of the pandemic period, our export of commodities to China had to be on hold for a brief moment. According to Asian Development Bank's estimation, this year we anticipating 2 to 4% growth, which is excellent given this situation of world economy.
If you had to split Mongolia's economy into different parts, be it commodity reliance and other sectors, how would that look?
Mongolia is very unique in the geopolitical position and its land size and the population. As you know, Mongolia borders with China and Russia. So to diversify the economy that is heavily dependent on commodities, we're looking not just during this pandemic period, we've been looking into diversifying economy using our agricultural opportunities and processing of livestock products. Digital economy transformation becomes quite important for us. So it gives us a lots of challenge, but a new way to adapt to the world economy.
Absolutely. And like you said, digital transformation kind of has been propelled into action during this current pandemic. And countries that are say slow to adopt digital transformation now have found that it's easier because they're sort of forced to. But now you said Mongolia's been divesting and diversifying and also optimizing with technology for some time. So what are the most recent innovations and movements that have happened in the DT space now that COVID has hit?
So this young generation that are very eager to get into new opportunities and new businesses, they've been looking into how to digitize all possible businesses. And then there were so many startups that are trying to learn from each other, also expand to other countries.
But now I'm curious, in an industry that from a legacy perspective, when it comes to commodities or raw materials generally, these are very human interaction intensive. How did these sectors in Mongolia in particular adapt? Was it teleconferencing? Can you vote online for changes in government? Like, how did that happen in Mongolia in particular?
It's a big challenge everywhere, and Mongolia was not exclusion. So digital transformation needed to be done at all levels, especially when the parliament session was to continue in the spring session in April. Before then, the legislators quickly worked on the draft of legislations to adopt the virtual communication on the parliament session. We have to rely on our own expertise, which gives them a chance to grow.
You did say that the population of Mongolia is quite young, and young usually resonates with technologically literate. Do you think that these changes are things that will stay just because they're adopted so fast from a younger population?
I think not only it will stay, but it will evolve. There are many engineers that work at Google and Apple and Facebook, etc., from Mongolia that have been showing promises, and some of them return to the country to work on their own projects, etc.
Now I'd like to take a step back and focus more on a global scale. What are you seeing from a Mongolian perspective, the changes in the commodity market, be it in Russia, China, and other countries that export similar goods to you?
The economy has to rely on one way or the other the mineral commodities in order to progress. Even though they say, oh, you can replace one mineral with something else, but still that replacement has to come from a different mineral as well. Commodity really needs to be utilized maybe more sustainably, but you still need them. So I think this kind of new environment helps human beings to work on how to utilize them in a more smart way, in a more sustainable way.
When transformations like this take place, it's also not just the room for old technologies turning into newer ones, but also birthing new ones. And on that note, I'm also very curious because I heard that Mongolia has been distributing digital banking licenses and diversifying into fintech quite a bit locally, but also internationally. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
There are a number of small private banks in Mongolia that have been just using traditional banking. But even before the COVID-19, there were applications for virtual banking licenses in Mongolia, and the central bank is very progressively working on the issuing the licenses, bringing foreign expertise to allocate digital banking. But in Mongolia, you would see that many people use digital banking quite progressively. In Singapore, it's already there that lots of cashless system. The same thing happens in Mongolia a lot. That you don't need the physical transaction.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. George, thank you so much for coming on.
Really appreciate it. Wish you all the best.
This is Coffee and Conversation. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned.